I will now call our second speaker on the opposition side of the motion, Dr. Frisbee Sheffield. Dr. Frisbee Sheffield is an expert in Plato's philosophy, especially his erotic writing, and holds a fellowship at Downing College, where she is the Director of Studies. Her research explores desire, love, and friendship, and considers their role in the good life. Currently, she's writing a book about Plato's Phaedrus and co-editing the Routledge Companion to Ancient Philosophy. Frisbee, the floor is yours.
Well, as a philosopher, I'm going to engage in a counterfactual exercise and imagine my ideal day as an Athenian to persuade you of its value. The exercise is going to range wildly over the classical period because there are many people I want to imagine meeting that may never, in fact, have crossed paths. In this exercise, I imagine myself as a man, conceding something to the brilliant case just made before me, because though women did not necessarily lead secluded lives, some of the opportunities that made Athens great were denied to women. If I had to remain a woman, I would either become part of a Pythagorean community, which typically did include women, that mystic cult of vegetarians who studied the teachings of Pythagoras, no doubt my maths would be a lot better, or I would be a high-class courtesan, such as Aspasia, who enjoyed greater freedom. She mixed with Socrates and the statesman Pericles. Before you take these limited opportunities for women, Pythagorean or courtesan, to be a fatal blow for the case for Athens, bear in mind that many self-respecting women, such as myself, can and do study classical literature, the bulk of which is Athenian, with great pride. Female experience is vividly drawn in Greek tragedy, for example. I would rather stand in the battle line 3 times than bear 1 child, says Euripides' Medea. Having had 3 myself, I can sympathize. Or consider the havoc wreaked by Medea, Clytemnestra, and so on as they rail against male supremacy. There were no female wallflowers in tragedy. And we're given the first feminist argument in Western literature for the equality of the sexes in Plato's Republic. There will be philosopher queens, no less than philosopher kings in his ideal state. Biological differences between men and women have no significant bearing on their
It's up in the gallery if you wish to take it.
I do.
Plato does indeed say that men and women can be to an extent equal. However, he does phrase that a woman with a golden soul can never be as good of a philosopher queen as a man with a golden soul, and therefore there is still inequality within Plato's work.
Thank you very much for that point. You're absolutely right. He does qualify the statement, saying, on the whole, it seems that men are more capable than women, but nonetheless, there are some exceptional women, and there is nothing in principle to rule them out from being in the position of guardian. So, I mean, that was leaps ahead of where anybody was at that time. And for arguments even comparable to that, I think we had to wait for John Stuart Mill's on the subjection of women. So, you know, he got pretty far. Though doubtless, as we've heard, women to some extent enjoyed greater freedom in Sparta. They could exercise outdoors naked with men. Frankly, I would rather be stuck at the loom reading Euripides and Plato in Athens on the side than exercising my childbearing hips in Sparta. With such a limited view of the rich possibilities for human aspiration that they had in Sparta, even being a repressed minority in Athens looks preferable to me, and I've always hated exercise. Nonetheless, let me remain a man in my counterfactual experiment of my ideal day in Athens. The first thing on my agenda would be going up to the Pnyx for a meeting of the Assembly of the Citizens at dawn. This would allow me to take part in the radical democracy that characterized Athens, and in exercising this capacity to speak publicly in the assembly, I imagine that would foster a vivid and vital sense of my own freedom and equality with my fellow citizens, such as was theorized by Pericles and the philosopher Aristotle. And this participation was actively encouraged in Athens. As Pericles put it, we alone regard the man who takes no part in public life, not as someone minding his own business, but as useless. The Athenian democracy raised all to the level of excellence by providing citizens with the space to control their destiny and an arena in which to earn greatness and glory. After exercising my capacities for deliberation and judgment, quite splendidly, I might suppose, I would then take myself down to the agora, the marketplace, another great public space, which I imagine to be somewhat like Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, but with more status, and would hope to bump into the philosopher Socrates, to be taken down a peg or two from my sense of self-importance, and perhaps given a sobering reminder of the dangers of mob rule. Would you choose a captain of a ship by lot, he might ask me. If not, why is it that you choose officers of the city by lot? I might also meet the strange thinker Cratylus, who denied stability of any kind, even to the subject of a speech and to their words, and so he only communicated by gesturing. Or, though years later, Diogenes the Cynic, a philosopher who lived in a barrel and urged Athenians to realize just how much of their lives was merely conventional. He quite literally performed this thought by masturbating in public. The Athenians, it turned out, were quite fond of him. When his barrel broke, they stumped up to replace it. This tolerance of oddballs demonstrates that Athens was a city structured around the freedom to live as one likes, as they put it. As Pericles said, the freedom we enjoy in our government extends also to our ordinary life. Far from exercising a jealous surveillance over each other, we don't feel called upon to be angry with our neighbor for doing what he likes, or to indulge those injurious looks which can't fail to be offensive. So one could hear voices like Socrates, communicate with gestures like Cratylus, masturbate in public with impunity like Diogenes. So Athens to me embodies an ideal of tolerance, openness, and debate, however much it fell short of that ideal in practice. After all, the Athenians put Socrates to death, evidently a stain on their history. But though he could have gone into exile, note that he refused because he could never abandon the city he loved. The culture of debate and self-reflection was a great draw for Socrates and countless others. One reason for this cultural climate goes back to those words of Pericles. Civic life was not optional, and great outdoor spaces were created with public funds to enable a meeting of minds and encourage debate and reflection. When Thucydides reflects on the physical remnants of ruined cities, he claims that in the case of Sparta, no one would suppose this to have been a great power, no great public building work such as the Parthenon, but just a group of villages not even organized into a single entity. It would look insignificant. With Athens, by contrast, one would imagine on the basis of what one saw that the city had been twice as powerful as it actually was.
Could you wait for the microphone? I'm so sorry.
So I'll preface this by saying that I'm actually similar to Paul. I'm actually from Sparta. I'm not an honorary member of Sparta, but I am from Sparta itself, modern-day Sparta, in the rolling valley of the Evrotas River. And I wanted to point out that at Thucydides 110, the passage which you're mentioning, he actually says that Sparta occupied 3/5 of the Peloponnese at the time, and that the ruins that the future generations would have seen of Sparta would actually, in fact, have misguided us to believe that Sparta had less power than she actually did.
Yes, quite. That although it was in fact a great power, just looking at the ruins, you would think it was less of a power than it actually was.
But that doesn't necessarily correspond to the truth of the matter.
That's absolutely right. That's his point, that given that they left no great buildings, one might be misled from that fact into thinking that they were less powerful than they were, in fact, in truth, they were.
Similarly to the Mycenaean fleet, which he's comparing to at the beginning of the
passage. So I concede that point.
Yeah.
But they still left no great buildings.
They may have been accidents of archaeological preservation due to the fact that the modern city of Sparta is built on top of the ancient city, which is not allowed.
If I may, you had a chance to audition to speak in this debate, and it sounds like it would have been an excellent speech, but we have to move on with time, if that's okay.
Okay, well, back to my ideal day. Next, I would go to the theatre to watch a tragedy, which is a characteristically Athenian phenomenon. Central to tragedy was a debate and agone, encouraging reflection on the issues central to life in the city. No easy resolutions would be offered, suffering would be revealed as human beings struggled to come to terms with irresolvable conflict, but citizens would face these together in communal spaces and transform these into beautiful artworks. I would probably need a drink after tragedy, so I would finish my ideal day at a symposium with friends, literally a drinking party where wine and ideas flowed freely, and perhaps hear discussion of love, such as Plato describes in the symposium. This space, too, was informed by a spirit of self-reflection. How much booze each could cope with was a kind of litmus test to discover how well one faced desire. Harmony and balance in all things, so one should drink to loosen the tongue, but not lose all sense of shame, get aroused by desire of all kinds, but meet them with moderation. And if one had failed to adhere to that great Hellenic ideal of harmony, you could always visit one of the Hippocratic school to restore somatic balance, at least. The value of the drinking party was not lost on Plato, who claimed in the Laws that spending time with wine is a great way to extend education. And indeed, he uses this to identify a shortcoming of Sparta. What the Spartans fail to notice is that drinking parties help citizens tolerate pleasure, much as the Spartans' physical practices help them tolerate pain. A city should train citizens to endure pleasure so that when the time comes for moderation and self-control, they're able to stand firm. The exclusive focus on courage in Sparta presents a limited view of the possibilities for human excellence. This limitation surely explains why the vast bulk of surviving Greek literature almost exclusively relates to ancient Athens. There were hardly any notable artists or intellectuals from Sparta. It seems fair to say that without the art and literature of the Athenians, we would just not have our ancient models at all. The study of classics would be a much shorter degree. To sum up by reworking a famous line of Achilles on visiting Hades, I would rather be a serf in Athens than king of all in Sparta.